I'd like to invite Nina and Federico also back to the stage, and we have time for some questions. You can still feel free to add more questions to the Q&A functionality umbrella, but I'm going to kick it off with a first question for Federico. In service design, we often have to deal with bringing across design skills to other people. With storytelling, how is that? Is storytelling a skill that you can teach other people to use, or is that a talent that you need to have?
Well, that's a really good question, because one part of the project was teaching storytelling to the sales representatives, and it is hard to teach storytelling. It's not easy, but the thing about storytelling is about repetition, doing it and doing it again. And there's going to be a time in which they're going to feel comfortable about, and everyone's going to have like their own style. And at the end, what you're looking is that they're telling the story in their own words and their own style. And you can give them, you know, like tools and things, but at the end they have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and somehow they're gonna get there.
Maybe I have a bit of a related question for Max. The local team that you assigned, did they have sort of a design background or totally not? And do you think that's necessary to have a certain background to do the design research, but also make the design decisions?
Yeah, the team we recruited was a blend. Two were social researchers working in sort of a different field of work, not quite in like a human-centered design space. And then three were really kind of self-employed entrepreneurs. I will say for our purposes, it was great that they were all very fluent in English and in 3 languages. Again, that's kind of our privilege that we were only able to communicate in English. We interviewed quite a few applicants, and this team sort of rose to the top because through kind of like a lot of sort of, I guess, skills, not tests, you know, but like assessments we gave around, you know, like, how would you solve this problem? What are your ideas? You kind of get a gauge for people's sort of proclivity to be creative and to analyze and synthesize.
Yeah, and maybe an extra question about that, like, what did the coaching look like? Did you coach them on tools or more mindsets that they should use? Did you really coach them in making the right design decisions content-wise, or was it purely the methodology that you helped them with?
Yeah, so for the most part, it was kind of like, you know, any short like human-centered design training. It was trying to start from, you know, a position of like encouraging creative mindsets. You know, and not everyone always kind of has that sort of like mindset when they start, I guess. And then moving more into, from a process perspective, just like being confident in coming up with ideas for themselves and not deferring to us as kind of foreign designers to sort of synthesize and come up with ideas based on the research. So that definitely took a lot of time, and I won't say that it worked perfectly. You know, there was a lot of like coaxing, and there was still a bit of a deferential attitude. But that was kind of our goal, was to really coach process, and then really try to yield the floor to this team to start to do their own synthesis work.
A question for Nina. Your story is very clear and very convincing. I think that you need to focus on the real valuable measurements. I assume the hard part is knowing then exactly what to measure. And I think as an external, it can be difficult to figure that out. So do you also have to teach your customers then to figure out what should we be measuring, and how do you go about that?
Absolutely. I think often when you start those kind of projects, the organization has strong ideas about what should be measured, and can often be quite wedded to the measures that they already have. And that's why going and doing that ethnographic research and saying we're going to take an outside-in point of view and look at things from the customer's perspective is so powerful, because it allows you to debunk some of those erroneous beliefs that people within the organization have, and lets you kind of fine-tune measures based on some real evidence of what customers kind of think is important and what matters to them. So it tends to be kind of in the early stages of the process, it's challenging. But once you get your ethnographic research back and you have those insights about how customers view the experience and what's important to them, it's pretty easy to persuade stakeholders about what should be being measured.
What are, because numbers, you can present numbers if you have those, but how do you present those more qualitative insights? Do you make stories, videos, or what kind of deliverables do you show to the stakeholders?
Stories are so powerful for persuading stakeholders. It depends on the client and what's appropriate for them. Often we'll take stakeholders with us when we're doing ethnographic research, so they kind of see it firsthand, and that's definitely the most powerful. But if not, videos are a really effective way of kind of communicating that real human experience of services to stakeholders, for sure. Yeah.
I have an audience question for Federico. I'll read it out loud. It might be a far off question, but did you look into mental health of designers and see how it can empower certain abilities in their design work?
Well, in this case, we didn't have the time. It was all so fast. We had to come together with the short stories and to go and prototype them. We didn't have the time to do that. So, but that's really interesting to look now in nowadays that we're working on the project and bringing more information into it. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Maybe another question from the audience also for Federico. I'm trying to, oh, yes, exactly. So someone is asking what the future of this storytelling project is. So are you identifying other stories, or what is the next step that you will take?
Yeah, so we started just with the 4 stories I told you. Now we've got a lot more. I believe we've got like 7 or 10 short stories. And the idea was to create a podcast, because that way physicians or psychiatrists were able to send the podcast to their patients, to their families, to the caregivers. And we converted that short stories into more shorter stories because it was difficult to get the sales representatives into doing the storytelling. So we had to create new tools. And we created the brochures we had nowadays are the clinical trials that the sales representatives have, but they're with pictures and drawings like the ones we had. And the idea is to continue making more stories. And what we want at Aptica is that these stories can get to the patients, not only to the psychiatrists. And we want to get a broader public in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Right. For Max, if you had the opportunity to do the same project now again, continued, where do you think would be more value? Would that be in using that same team of local designers because they already have their skills and they might be able to achieve more? Or would it be more valuable to get another group of people to learn those skills? Which would be more valuable, do you think?
You know, I mean, for the purposes of kind of like continuing to stay steeped in the goals of this work and this project, I think given the amount of time that it took throughout the first project to get through that training and that coaching experience, you know, we all kind of got to the end and we were like, oh, we wish we could keep going. We wish there was more, because we were just kind of getting into a rhythm as a blended team. So, you know, my gut says it would probably be amazing to continue to work with that same group. Not to say, obviously, that it would also be valuable if given the opportunity to work with a new group, but just my first take.
Yeah, and maybe a continued question, at what point do you think that group would be able to start training people themselves?
Yeah, we don't have, you know, like a formal metric or certification. We just are always excited when people, you know, grab onto different elements of the process and say, oh, this would be cool if I apply this in my own small business or whatever it might be. You know, a couple of them were stoked to start implementing design and thinking about it, you know, after week 1 of us talking with them. So, you know, I'm sorry I don't have a great answer for you there in terms of metrics. But yeah, you know, by the end of the 6-month project we had, I think quite a number, you know, they were already sharing it with the organizations they work with or other business people they work with. So at least that excitement is what we were most proud of, I guess.
Yeah, what I'm also wondering about the team, like the long-term impact. So you engage them for a period for the design project that you did together. But what afterwards? Is their current role still building on the ideas that you in the project together came up with? And do they do that in their own, because you say they were local entrepreneurs, is it now part of their own business, or is there a company that is helping them, or how should we see how they are now evolving with all the ideas?
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely a bit of a tricky question, because we were very transparent with this team that we were hired by a larger organization to do a short-term consultancy, and that this research group was going to be a part of our short-term consultancy as our design team. So there was never any sense that, like, at least for them as researchers, that, you know, they would continue this specific work. They were excited about the opportunity basically for professional development and to build a new skill that they could then apply. So, you know, I myself have not stayed in close contact with that team the last few months, but certainly something, you know, that as we're hoping to continue this work in the future, we hope to bring on the same team, but that's as much as I can say for now.
Yeah.
Okay. And Nina, are there still any organizations where you say they should continue to work in the old-fashioned way, looking at the numbers, or would you say, in fact, the world has changed, every organization should change to this new way of looking at support and help desks?
I don't think you can kind of make any kind of universal statements like that everybody should do that. Each organization kind of that we work with is unique and has their own challenges. But I would say the majority of service-orientated organizations, if they are absolutely serious about being customer-centric, which so many of them claim to be, then yes, you need to think in those terms and think about measuring value in a cohesive way so you make better decisions. And, you know, that those contact centers are a really integral part of the experience, even though they feel a bit legacy to a lot of organizations and something to be minimized or even outsourced. They're actually a really important part of people's experiences, even when they don't use them particularly often. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at some point you refer to it as a bit of a robot role that the people there have. What are ways in which you can give autonomy to people in a call center? Yeah,
so I think fundamentally it's about a bit of a cultural shift. So winning the hearts and minds of the senior leadership that they don't need to treat those people like robots. I have done quite a bit of ethnography myself, sitting alongside call center agents, and it is not a low-skilled job by any means. They're very, very impressive people. And they want to do right by the customers and have, generally speaking, pretty good instincts for what to do. And often the systems and the rules are getting in their way. So I think fundamentally, it's about that kind of cultural shift with the senior leaders to kind of stop viewing them as robots. And then secondly, investing more in training around customer experience for those colleagues so that they've got confidence in the way that they're solving problems, and they don't feel like they've got to stay within particular guidelines and rules for things, and senior leaders kind of relaxing a bit and kind of letting go of control and handing that over to the call center agents. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think many organizations are now exploring also the robotic type of questions that they could actually have them performed by a robot, and then at some point give like a handover to an actual person if it's a complex problem or more human or personal problem. Do you have experience with that, or do you have suggestions? Should organizations invest in making part of at least the call center activities like in a more standard way? And then providing a handover if it's complex, adding value to the service, or?
Yeah, I think if it's a simple problem that's kind of easy and predictable, then yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to solve those things with artificial intelligence kind of driven robotic assistance. But quite frequently, somebody's looking for that human interaction kind of purposefully. So I was working with a bank a few years ago looking at car insurance renewals processes. And understandably, customers wanted to speak to a human because they thought they could negotiate with a human. And in that situation, a kind of robot was not going to cut it. So I think you have to be smart about when you apply those things, and equally kind of recognize that sometimes it's the human connection that someone's actively seeking out, not just having their kind of problem solved in a kind of clinical way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to steal a question from the other stage, but I think we can ask the same question here. It's a question for all three of you. How are storytelling, meaningful measuring, and developmental design coaching, how are they all connected? Perhaps Federico, as a storyteller, I'm letting you get started.
No, can you repeat the question, please?
So how would you say that storytelling, meaningful measurement of experience, and design coaching with in development context, how are your stories related?
Well, I believe they're all part of service design. You know, there are different phases from the methodology, but at the end, you need everything in order to get a good project, or a project you can, you know, come here and speak about it, and you create change within the world. That at the end, that's what at least I am looking with service design and content creation. So I believe that's the thing about the three topics you told.
Max?
I mean, my initial take is just that, like, one of the coolest moments from our experience was when we asked our team, you know, to not focus on like writing so much of the data they were gathering, but just like tell each other the stories from the day. And it was like this like new like light bulb went off, and they were all super excited to start sharing stories. And so this idea that like stories are data, and like that's really the language that we're all communicating in, you know, it was really cool to see. And so I apologize, I'm not making all three connections at the moment, but that was the first thing that came to mind, is that it was really like a change in direction for our whole process when they came to that conclusion that the whole thing was about sharing and interpreting stories.
Great. And Nina?
And for me, those things are all about being persuasive and changing the culture of organizations. You know, the measurement I talked about is fundamentally underpinned by the stories you get back from doing the research. And in my experience of doing that kind of coaching role with organizations, it's amazing the kind of multiplying effect that has. You do one project, but those people take those skills back into their day jobs. So they start applying them in places that you never expected to see those things happening. And sharing stories as well about the kind of experience of those projects, again, starts to kind of shift the culture of the organization, and really helps when you're trying to persuade senior leaders about different ways of doing things.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think thank you for all these super interesting answers, and your chats as well, your talks that you gave this evening. I think we can round off here before we go into a break, and then afterwards there will be some more talks. We will leave you for now. Another host will take over. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks a lot, and a big round of global applause for our three wonderful speakers. Good night.
Bye.